We do have a ton to get through in this episode.
Common sense is finally prevailing.
There was controversy this month, Dave.
I'm not particularly excited by that.
Secrets and things on set.
I haven't told them anything.
I think this is just good times all round.
Every Doctor Who is liked by somebody, and that's a really good thing.
Davo, my doctor.
I know we disagree on this one.
First world problems, Dave.
I get why fans are asking those questions.
Oh gosh, that's actually quite a lot to talk about.
It doesn't compute.
It's the elephant in the room.
That's okay.
Fandom versus the BBC.
The cardinal sin.
Moving along.
Lunch.
G'day, I'm Rob.
You are, and I'm Dave.
And this is the Doctor Who show for July 2026, into the second half of the year already, Dave. Hello.
Hello. How are you, Rob?
I'm not too bad, Dave. It's cold and miserable for both of us, I guess, and but that's okay.
Yes, it's July. It's cold and it's wet. That's all we can say.
It's what happens. Folks, a bit of housekeeping before we get to the news. Can we start by saying thank you to everyone who gave us feedback on our June episode, where we split the episode into two pieces. It was a bit of an experiment for us because of how long the episode turned out, and I think it turned out very well, Dave. Interestingly, the stats show more people listen to the Gatwa half than the RTD2 half.
Is that right?
Yeah, I haven't told you that.
No, that's very interesting. There were a number of things we needed to talk about last month, and we did. But no, clearly, as we thought, there were some people who maybe are a little bit done with the news and the speculation, and is it a wilderness years or just a slightly lonely years? I don't know. But the chance to go back and actually reflect on the Gatwa era and rewatch some episodes, I actually enjoyed doing, and I think a few listeners enjoyed the conversation and reflecting as well.
Yeah, we got very good stats for both. Don't let me give people the wrong idea, but we just got like an extra boost on the Gatwa stuff. So a few more people out there, maybe not even regular listeners perhaps, tuned in for that.
That's very interesting.
We've also put out our list of 16 potential new doctors in 16 for 16 last week, if you've not heard that yet. That was a very fun ep to do. And next month, we'll be back to read some of your listener picks. They're still coming in as we record this episode, so we'll collate those for next month's episode.
Yes, 16 for 16 has only been out a couple of days at time of recording. I had a lot of fun doing that as well, although we perhaps did reach a slightly gloomy or disappointing conclusion, Rob, but we'll leave that for listeners to listen to.
Alrighty. Last bit of housekeeping. I believe you've continued your hobby of going on other Doctor Who podcasts and have guested on one about a novel.
Yes, I was invited to guest on the Hamster Book Club podcast, which is run by Joe Ford, and as of about 14 minutes ago, they've released an episode talking about Just War.
Ah, I know that's one you like.
It is one that I like. We had against a lot of... Well, was it fun talking about Just War? That's probably not the right word because it's a very, very serious book. But look, I think people know I like to turn up and talk about the Virgin books. So Joe was very kind and had me on with Dylan to talk about two of those. You can find them in all the usual podcast places if you want some more of me somewhere else.
Well, how about that?
How about that?
Yes. Shall we get into some news?
We should, Rob, and I think you've got one of the most earth-shattering, unexpected pieces of news ever. Tell us, Rob. I'll prepare my shocked face.
Yes. Let's start with something that happened last week relative to when this podcast is going to drop, which is that during the BBC's annual report day, the CEO of BBC Studios, Tom Fussell, declared the intent of BBC Studios to compete for Doctor Who's production rights when the tender goes live, I assume sometime later this year. And I quote Tom, "We've been the producer for 60 years, and we want to be the producer for another 60 years, so we will be going in for that tender with gusto. We are in it to win it." And Dave, I don't think there could be any less shocking news than this.
No, as I said in our monthly show last month, appropriately, there'll be two parts to all of these tenders that are being put together. One will be the fun, creative side. What do we want Doctor Who to look like? Who's going to run it? How's it all going to work? I think there's a lot of speculation that BBC Studios' pitch will be fairly expected in that sense. And then, of course, there's the other less fun side of the tender, which is how much money they would need the BBC to pay them to make it. So we'll see what happens, but I guess the race is off.
Yeah, well, I've been talking about BBC Studios throwing their hat into the ring at some stage, almost as soon as the tender was announced, the process was announced. And I know Richard Osman was talking about it on the Rest is Entertainment podcast the week the tender was first mentioned too. And he actually had a stat about how if BBC Studios bids on something, they usually win 70 or 80% of the time. Something crazy like that. So we may already have an insight into where all this is going. I mean, imagine being an independent company and BBC Studios starts throwing around its weight. Would you even bother? I think it's the kind of path that is just going to lead us to, Pete McTighe the new showrunner or something like that.
Yeah, look, it's reasonable speculation that would be the case, but it is only speculation. I guess we'll wait and see. The question is going to be, though, how much can they make Doctor Who for, and can the BBC afford it, either by themselves or, as I said, with overseas sales deals or with a partnership with a streaming company, and, what does that all do to the tender process? We'll wait and find out. It's still not impossible that the BBC looks at these tenders and goes, none of them are in our price range, we'll wait another few years.
Yeah, because I know you're keen still on the streamer thing. I mean, it might be once bitten, twice shy for the BBC, but I know you've got some keenness for it.
Not so much keenness, just economic reality. I mean, Doctor Who is an expensive television show. It's got large cast, large production values, huge amounts of location filming, large amounts of special effects, all of that costs money, and, someone needs to pay that money. And if it's not the BBC, it's got to be somebody they're distributing it with. Now, if that's the ABC and CBC and, Channel 1 in New Zealand, I think it is, whoever it is that shows Doctor Who around the world, fine. But if they either are not interested, particularly having been burnt by the BBC, or if they are not willing to pay a particularly large price, because all of these networks are, struggling in the new world environment. The ABC is no longer one of 4 channels in Australia. It's one of 1 million channels around the world competing, and its revenue from government is not going backwards, but it is probably compared to inflation, in real terms going backwards. 1.3 billion is a lot, but it's a fixed amount.
Yeah.
And the other networks, New Zealand has far less input from the public purse than the ABC and the BBC do. So, do they have the money that the BBC expects them to pay for it? Are they under pressure to buy more locally produced content? That sort of comes around every 5 years. So they're not a given, and if they are not willing to pay it, or not enough of them are willing to pay it, then your overseas distributor has to be an online streamer.
Yeah, the TV landscape is very, very interesting at the moment, that's for sure. Do you have a piece of news for us, Dave?
I don't so much have a piece of news as more rumours and speculation, because, Rob, we skipped it last month, but we're back to talking about the war between the land and the bloody sea. And
Here
the
we go.
the fact that it still hasn't been put out on Disney+. Speaking of streamers, speaking of things not quite working out. Now, there was an article that said, while Disney never shared its streaming date for the series, a BBC press release stated that The War Between the Land and the Sea would stream on Disney Plus in, quote, early 2026. Rob, it is now July, going into August. It is obviously not streaming on Disney Plus, so therefore that press release is now wrong. Whether it was just an educated guess that failed, or it was more of this deceitful spin that we talked about last month about, everything's happening soon, don't worry. Oh, it's not really. And silly you for believing us. Maybe it's more of that. I don't know. You and I did see a post online that gave a release date of the 9th of January 2027. Mm-hmm. Nobody seems to know what's going on, but at this point, you almost sort of wonder what's the point. I mean, anybody who was desperate to watch it has surely by now, if not taken to the high seas to watch it, gone and bought the Blu-ray or the DVD. So there's going to be some interest in watching it. I'll probably tune on to watch it at some point, but if it comes out in January next year, that's going to be it's not going to be a thing I'm going to race to go and see. And It's all just very, very bizarre.
Yeah, I find it odd from the point of view that you would think that once Disney sort of washed its hands of the Doctor Who deal, it'd just want to get rid of anything left on the shelf and just say, oh, just throw this stuff out there, just get it out there, rather than hanging on to it. Like it's almost like a weight around their neck. They still have this relationship with Doctor Who, even though there is no relationship with Doctor Who. They still have this unseen stuff to show the world, literally. I must say, I've not taken to the high seas or bought the Blu-ray, and I don't have Disney Plus. So I may never see this, Dave, and I don't feel I'm missing out. But yeah, I find it just very weird from Disney's point of view why they're just not getting it off the shelf, so to speak.
Yeah, particularly once the BBC had sort of jumped ahead of the believed plan and just gone, sod it, we're releasing this on our network now.
Yes, yes.
Why wouldn't you just be right, how quickly can we get this out there? Because, yeah, as I said, the bigger the gap between the two, the greater the audience finding it some other way is going to be.
Yeah, exactly. Moving on to short topics. I'll go first. I mentioned in the recent Don't Read the Comments tribute episode to Justin Richards that the NSA I picked up to read this month, on the day we heard Justin had passed, was Martha in the Mirror, weirdly a Justin Richards novel. Just total coincidence that the next novel was one of his. I've now finished that, and Cards on the Table, I don't think it was one of his best works. It does feature Tennant and Martha very well. It captures the vibe of their era, especially their dialogue. You can sort of read this and think, oh, this is like watching a TV episode. That's good. But the storyline itself was a bit boring, a bit plodding in places, a bit predictable. Especially there's this young character who had a twin who died, or did she die, or is she playing both roles, that sort of thing. And then you layer on, there's a lot of space opera stuff, and this space name race has been fighting that space name race because of this space reason, and this space name person has come to talk peace with this space name person. And it's just exposition central in places. I was losing track of all the characters. There's even a bit where the Doctor reads someone's diary, so we can just get 2 or 3 pages of pure info dump as if we're just reading someone's diary rather than working it into dialogue. If anything, I think it suffers a bit by having too many things going on for a 200-something page, largish text sort of novel. There's even a Holmesian double act played by 2 robot builders written into the piece just to really add to the mix. Weirdly, I can see why some people might really like this, but it didn't do much for me. NSAs can be a bit hit or miss. Some are really good, most are fine, a few are dire. This isn't dire, I've got to say, Dave, but it didn't blow my mind either.
Look, that's fair enough. A question without notice, Rob.
Oh, okay.
What would you say are your favourite Justin Richards book or books?
Oh, golly. I would have to sit down with a list and look at what I'm comparing. He's got novels spread across Virgin, BBC books in terms of like the EDAs and PDAs and the NSAs. It probably wouldn't be one of the NSAs because they are the more junior type, the smaller type books. It'd probably be something coming out of the EDA, PDA type range. No,
I just was a little bit curious. Didn't want to put you on the spot there. I have heard a couple of podcasts that have done tributes to Justin Richards, and there have been a lot of posts on social media that did it as well. And consistently, the books Dreams of Empire and Shadows in the Glass were mentioned, and I didn't own those. So I have gone out and bought those and put them on my to-read list sometime.
I'm looking down the list now. Past Doctor Adventures, Dreams of Empire, Millennium Shock, Grave Matter, The Shadow in the Glass, some of the ones you've bought. But it's probably going to come from the EDAs. And I'm looking down the list. There's Option Lock, there's Demontage, Banquo Legacy, The Burning, which I know you've read, Dave.
Yes.
Time Zero and Sometime Never. Ooh, I mean, The Burning is pretty good, but maybe Sometime Never.
Okay.
And then I'm continuing down the list. Then he's got a bunch of NSAs for the 9th, 10th, and 11th Doctors. Gosh, he wrote a lot. And a lot of non-fiction as well. Reference-type books and things that are very, very good. A bunch of NAs and Benny books as well.
Yes, some of the Benny books are definitely some of the better ones in the range. Yes.
Yeah, he just did so much. That's why I had to really sit down and look at this list. I knew it would probably come from the BBC books somewhere, but yeah. Yeah, I'll go with Sometime Never.
Okay, fair enough. I'll keep us going on short topics. Now, recently, Rob, you and I both bigged up an episode of the Too Hot for TV podcast called We Love the 90s, or We Heart the 90s. And in that podcast, one of the panel asked the question about what was your first Doctor Who magazine. And I thought, it was Doctor Who magazine 181, and I've told the story before about finding that in the local newsagent and going and telling the newsagency I wanted to subscribe, and so I got a little drop-down folder in the filing cabinet with my name on it, and every month a new Doctor Who magazine would pop in that folder for me to buy, and over time it, got company from Dreamwatch, and briefly read Red Dwarfs magazine. That was a weird publication, and then Air Power Monthly. Then I thought, actually, whilst that was the first Doctor Who magazine of that run when I became a subscriber and started to religiously read DWM across the 90s, there were actually issues of DWM in my life before, and I haven't told those stories. So I thought I'd briefly do that here. Now, going back to the Australian summer of 1983, I would have been about 3.5. And during that period, there were ads on the ABC, particularly around Doctor Who, for the Doctor Who 20th Anniversary magazine. And I saw that and thought, this looks amazing. I want this, I want this, I want this. So I said to my dad, I want the Doctor Who magazine, the one on the TV. And he's like, oh, okay. And he's a fan, so he wasn't opposed to this. So he went off to work a few days later and came back with an issue of Doctor Who Monthly. With Sergeant Benton on the cover, issue number 82. And I was flicking through it before. It's got an interview with John Levine and all the sorts of things you'd want. But I said, no, I don't want that one, Dad. I want the special one that's on the TV. And he's like, oh, okay, well, I'll go have another look. And a couple of days later, he went to work and he came home with the Doctor Who magazine Winter Special for 1983.
Nice.
Which has got some cool pictures on the cover. It's got Davo and Chameleon and a Silurian and the Garm, and it's got all these articles about monsters in Doctor Who, and it was really cool with lots of great photos. I mean, let's face it, I wasn't reading this at 3.5, but I was looking at all these pictures of Doctor Who monsters. But Dad, no, not that one, the one on the TV. And I think that night when we were watching Doctor Who, the ad did come on, and I said, see, that one. And he did go to work the next day and bought me the 20th Anniversary magazine that I was after. But out of that, I did get 2 free issues of Doctor Who Monthly.
Nice.
So they were my first 2. My third was one that we picked up at a Doctor Who club meeting at a Christmas party. Someone was selling their old tat there, and for 50 cents we got issue number 123 of Doctor Who magazine, which has a really great painted cover of Hartnell and 3 different types of Cybermen, and I've got that here. But the other one that I think was quite amusing was at the start of 1991. I was in grade 5, and at assembly very early in the year, the library teacher for the primary school part of the school stood up at assembly and she said, I've been given some money to go and refurbish our magazine section because I've been subscribing to all these things for years. I know some of you don't want them anymore. There's new magazines out there. So I've got some money. I've gone and bought a whole bunch of different magazines, and I want you students to read them over the next 3 weeks and vote for which ones you want us to subscribe to, and the school will start subscribing to those now. So I went along one lunchtime to the school library and saw that there was an issue of Doctor Who magazine amongst this pile of test magazines that they had bought. And it was, in fact, issue number 167 from November of 1990. Great painted cover of some Imperial Daleks and a Dalek shuttle from Remembrance blowing things up. It's the Graham Williams tribute special, so it's got a lot of stuff in there. And of course, I went and voted for Doctor Who magazine. I suspect I might have been the only one who did, and it certainly did not beat the other ones. But a couple of weeks later at assembly, the library teacher stood up again and said, thank you for voting. Now, Friday, lunchtime, at the end of lunchtime, I'm not going to keep all these old editions because we don't want lots of old magazines cluttering up the school library because we're going to be getting new ones of the ones we're subscribing to. So at the end of lunchtime on Friday, when the bell goes, everybody is allowed to come, and if you want one of these magazines, you can have that one, but one each. And so, of course, there was a race of students at Friday lunchtime to get, the Mad magazine that was there or something else, the popular ones. And there was this sort of, somebody would grab it and just make sure they're reading it all lunchtime so it was theirs. I, of course, rushed to go and grab the issue of Doctor Who magazine and just read it from cover to cover as slow as I could, because I was terrified if I put it down for a second, someone else might have grabbed it and it would have been theirs at the end of lunchtime. Again, I don't think I needed to worry about the competition.
Yeah.
But
not in 1990s Australia, no.
No, not in 1991 Australia. But no, at the end of lunch, the moment the bell rang, I raced up to the desk with Doctor Who magazine 167 in my hands, and the teacher just looked at me very knowingly and said, yes, of course, yes, go take it, David. Yes, it's yours.
Oh, that's very nice. Lovely.
Yes.
I remember that issue quite well myself, because my Doctor Who magazines, the first one I bought with my own money was 119, and I was still buying them up into the 160s, 170s before I started to drop off. This was like my first flourish of fandom between 119 and 170 something, yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, this did make me remember that the Doctor Who magazines I couldn't get here back when I was subscribing were the specials. I would see them advertised in the monthlies, and they weren't part of a subscription unless you actually subscribed through the magazine itself, which, I mean, in Australia, you could easily double the cover price if you wanted to subscribe directly and get it mailed to you, rather than wait for it to come to the local news agents 3 months later. So I had no mechanism. There was no way as a 14-year-old in Australia to buy those ones. How could you do it? So I did actually go on eBay and have a look. And again, the problem is, because it was harder to get, there isn't a big second-hand market for them. And there are basically no copies on eBay in Australia because no one else in Australia had them, or the people that did were serious collectors who probably still want them. You know, I looked at a few and thought, oh, I'll pay that price for it. And then you can literally triple the price on eBay to get them posted out flat to Australia. So just another piece of merchandise that I'm still wistfully thinking about and still don't have.
Yeah, there was I think it was a winter special around 86 that had a really good, probably an Andrew Skilleter cover of Tom Baker.
Right.
That sticks out in my mind. I don't own it. Yeah, I remember that one vividly. Like, I would love to read that, because I would see advertisements for it.
Yeah, it's funny how some of those covers, particularly the painted ones, really do just stand in the mind.
Yeah, they do. Moving on, I've got an interesting short topic here, Dave, because this is a thought I've been having recently, and I had it big time after we both saw Masters of the Universe and did our Alternate Galaxies episode about it.
Yes.
And by the way, Masters of the Universe has just dropped on Amazon, and it's free. It's not a rental. Anyone can watch it. Isn't that amazing? Nice. Anyway, yeah. After we did our podcast, I watched some other reviews on YouTube, and there were some guys my age who were just going nuts about the film. And one of them looked like he was about to cry, where he was describing the scene late in the film where Adams talked about how he named all the characters when he was a kid on Earth. And they're like, and what did you call yourself? And he's all sheepish. You remember this, Dave? He's all sheepish.
Yes.
And eventually he admits he called himself He-Man, and they all laugh at him. Personally, I thought that was a really funny part of the film. But this reviewer was like, the film was mocking fans. It was mocking people like you and me. It was mocking us. And dead set, he looked on the verge of tears, or maybe punching somebody, or maybe both. And I thought, it's possible to be too close to an IP. Because with Masters of the Universe, I played with them. I watched the cartoon in the 80s. I even watched the reboot in the early 2000s that seemingly no one else did, but has recently been rediscovered, and the fandom's like, oh my god, there's this series from the year 2000, which is amazing. Yeah, it is. Anyway, I'm no casual with the IP, but I'm not really obsessive about it. I could go years with barely thinking about it. And I think that helped how I saw the film. When I saw the film was saying, let's have some fun. And I was like, hell yes, let's have some fun. But for someone like this guy, who seemed to be very, 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 very into it, he took it very badly. And probably no film would have satisfied him. There have been other IPs like this. I looked to the reboot of Battlestar Galactica, and, it had a female Starbuck, and it was quite, different in some ways to the original. And I took
more than some ways, Rob. It was almost a different show.
Yeah, but I took on all of that quite easily, because although I knew the IP, I used to play it in the schoolyard when I was a kid in the early 80s. I wasn't obsessed and down the rabbit hole with it. And now I'm getting to my point. It makes me wonder, when people do weird stuff with Doctor Who, or new stuff with Doctor Who, or Star Wars, IPs that I'm really, really, really into, do I have a similar blind spot? You know, is blind spot even the right word? I don't know. Because I like them a bit too much, and I'm maybe a bit too wrapped up in ideas of what I think they are and what they should be, so I react in ways I wouldn't react when it comes to other IPs that I'm fond of but not obsessive about, if that makes sense.
No, it makes a lot of sense, and I'm reflecting on a couple of movies I saw where I was in a similar position of sort of knowing the franchise but not being, deep down in the franchise. I'm thinking of a fairly recent Terminator film, and I'm thinking of Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull, where I walked out of both of those and have gone, yeah, things were good. It was Arnie doing some Terminator stuff in San Francisco. That was cool. I was entertained for a couple of hours, and this was Harrison Ford, running around doing some boys' own adventure stuff and some archaeology and a few quips and a couple of car chases, and that's what I think Indiana Jones is. I was entertained. This is fine. And then I sort of come out of the cinemas and have all these people who were more invested going, they got it wrong, man. They missed out the point. Oh, that wasn't what my childhood was like. Oh, and I'm just going, yeah, really? I thought they were fine. I was entertained.
Yeah.
And so you're right. I think that there are probably people who do watch Doctor who just like, yeah, I watched Doctor Who as a kid. They couldn't tell you who John Nathan Turner was. They probably can't name, half the Doctors, but they go, oh yeah, I enjoyed that as a kid, and they watch the modern series and they go, okay, I was entertained for 45 minutes. That's cool. What's next?
Yeah. They might even say, I watched Peter Davidson.
Very possibly, yes. Or, I like the one with the scarf.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just a thought I've had, and I'm wondering if I can work it into, when I'm thinking about Doctor Who in the future, whether would I think this same way if I wasn't as invested in the show? I don't know.
Oh, look, almost certainly not. It's got to have an effect, can't it?
Yeah, exactly. And to round us out, what have you got, Dave?
I recently reread one of my favourite Virgin New Adventures, The Highest Science by Gareth Roberts. This is one of those books that I've loved ever since I first read it at the age of about 12. Over the years, I've slowly discovered that it's actually not one of the more popular ones. And in fact, I've listened to a few podcasts recently. For example, Too Broad, Too Deep have talked about it. And they've been quite down on it. And not, in a horrible, nasty, pejorative sense, just a quite honest and constructive way. Not too keen on this. And I thought, what's going on? So I reread it, and I still love it, Rob. And I'm very happy to say that The Higher Science is not, the objectively best new adventure. It's not the best written new adventure. It's not the best structured new adventure. It's not the most original new adventure. That's fine. They're objective criteria. But in terms of what I just enjoy reading, I absolutely loved it. It's got the Shalonians, which is a great, cool, interesting concept. It's got a little bit of sort of humour without trying to be all Douglas Adamsy or jokey. It's just got some nice, witty lines in there. It's got weird science fiction stuff happening. It's got the 812s, which are a really cool concept. It's got the chapter titled Death of a Real Estate Agent, which I love. It's got a really cool twist that I really like about what's happening with Sakrat. It's got Shell Decker, who in my mind is played by Paul Darrow. It's just a fun adventure in space and time with McCoy and Bernice and some cool ideas. And I find it really fun and entertaining, and that's okay. That's allowed.
I'm going to take a punt that the backlash against Gareth Roberts is playing into some of those reviews out there.
Look, it might be, but look, I'm honest enough to say, reading it again now, I get that it's not the best written. It's not badly written. I think it's quite an entertaining read. But, it's not as, revelatory as Revelation was, or, some of the very well... I mean, it's not Just War. It's not right. It's not Just War, which I can read that and go, not only do I enjoy this and think this is a great book, but objectively, this is a very well-written book and a very good piece of, work. I can say that The Higher Science is not that. But I still love it. I still enjoy it. And, maybe it's just another one of those that's just for me. And there are people that enjoy different Doctor Who episodes differently, Doctor Who big finishes differently, and some just resonate for some of us more than others. And that's good. I'm glad I read it again. I'm glad I enjoyed it. And I'm probably back to an EDA next.
Very good. Excellent stuff. Alrighty, moving on to our main topic. Tonight, as you can see from, well, your podcatcher of choice, we are looking at Tomb of the Cybermen based on a vote that went out to you all on Pollmaker. We had 123 votes in the end, Dave, and Tomb of the Cybermen won with 34% of the vote. The Deadly Assassin, one of my choices, just got pipped. It was in on 28%. Resurrection of the Daleks, my other choice, was on 24%. And the Sea Devils, which was your second choice, was on 13%. So, Dave, your horse got up. Give us your reasons for nominating it.
My horse did get up, and I actually was quite surprised because I've got to say, Rob, when you said that one of your picks was the Deadly Assassin, I sat there and thought, I've got no hope. Rob's put a classic Tom Baker story in the mix. That's it. I'm dead in the water. But no.
But we know that I don't win polls, Dave, so no.
You do sometimes. You do.
Very rarely.
Yeah, no. I thought I was Brian Jones, dead in the water. But it turns out that Tim the Cyberman did get the votes. Why did I pick it? Two reasons. First of all, I just felt, and I felt for a while, we need to do something Troughton-y sometime, and I've put a couple of Troughtons up in polls over the last year, and they haven't made it. So I thought, okay, let's try Tomb of the Cybermen and see if that can get up. And had that failed, I was going to go for the Invasion next. Just come on, you can't not vote for the Invasion. But Tomb did win. But the other reason is I think that Tomb still exists in fan consciousness as the story that was found. I think it's probably the biggest deal that I've seen in my time of fandom of a missing episode or a missing story, a complete story being found. It's still talked about in that sense, even though it's more than 30 years since it was found. It's been found now for much longer than it was missing. I think it's still, the discourse about it is still all about this completely uncorroborated and fake narrative that, it was found and it went down in fans' appeal. Like, no, it didn't. It regularly was in the top 10 of DWM polls before, after, and significantly after it was found. So it never dropped down. But that's the discourse. And not often do people have a deep dive and just talk about it as a story in its own merits. And I thought that could be fun to do.
Yeah. Well, like I said, when you nominated Tomb live on the show, Dave, it's a story I've actually watched a decent amount over the years. So on a personal level, I was put in a bit of a funny spot. Of the 4 stories we had up for grabs, it was probably the one I was least interested in talking about. Because from your picks, I would have preferred watching the Sea Devils. Because personally, I don't have a huge rewatch history with that. And obviously, I would have enjoyed either of my 2 stories, and that's why I picked them. You know, will the Deadly Assassin ever get up in a bloody poll? It's bloody great, you guys. Vote for it if I put it up again. Jesus Christ. But park that. The flip side to this situation is that Tomb of the Cybermen is a story I've watched multiple times because I do enjoy it. So it's not like I think it's a bad story, and I was happy to watch it again. Which might lead us into our first memories, Dave. Do you want to take us off there?
So look, I was around fandom at the point where this was found. In fact, I can remember opening the copy of the local fanzine Sonic Screwdriver that had come in the post. My copy and Dad's copy had come in the post. I would have been just turned 11 at the time, I reckon. Inside, there was a piece of paper that had clearly just been inserted after printing and before posting, basically, to say Tomb had been found. And then the next issue of the fandom, it was a big cover, Tomb's been found, the fanzine, I should say. So I remember that happening, and I remember everybody sort of wanting to get that copy. And then finally, at some point, it was released, and somebody was able to get a copy from the UK, and we all went to the local Doctor Who Club of Victoria meeting, which was held in a childcare centre in Box Hill for some reason. I don't know quite why. I guess someone's mum was probably, or dad was probably on the committee or something, and so they got a cheap rate. But that was where we held our meetings for 6 months. Just at this childcare centre in Box Hill for no apparent reason. So
or maybe they weren't paying for it at all. Maybe it was a bit on the sly.
Yeah. Often these things were. Basically, when we didn't have a student going to Melbourne Uni who could get us a room at the Union House for free. We had to hire or sneak in somewhere cheap. That's fandom in the 80s, 90s, guys.
Yeah.
But, sitting in a room packed with fans in chairs designed for, 12-year-olds, so it was fine for me. Everyone else must have been pretty uncomfortable. and just sitting there and watching the story. It was obviously the official release with Morris Barry's 5-minute doco on the front, and seeing it with a bunch of fans for the first time. I can remember then waiting for it to be released locally in Australia, and every time my parents took us down to Maya Eastland nearby, just sort of rushing off to the third floor to the video section to see if Tomb of the Cybermen had arrived yet. And that was the second ever Doctor Who video that I got. So I do remember having it. I do remember watching it repeatedly, but less so over the last few years. And I think perhaps a bit like you said, Rob, it's one that I go, well, I did watch it a lot when I was a teenager and even in my 20s. So I'm very familiar. And so I don't pull it out as much. And suddenly you go, oh, I've overcompensated and maybe haven't pulled it out as often as I should.
Yeah, I've got a similar story in some ways, because I remember Tomb being found. It was late 91, wasn't it?
Yes.
I think. Yeah. Probably going into 92, because I was hanging on to my early Doctor Who fandom by the skin of my teeth, and I was still getting the data extract newsletter from the Australasian Doctor Who fan club.
Yeah,
so that's where
just been Sydney. Come on. Australasian. Sydney.
Anyway, that's probably where I would have read the news, whenever that issue came out. Maybe it was slightly in the new year, I don't know. Then in 1992, I think we got the video released sometime that year. So I was in year 12, and I didn't have a casual job. I didn't start working until very late in 1992. So any spending money was whatever my parents gave me. I didn't have a lot to splash around. But my older brother, who I've often mentioned on these podcasts, bought the video, which gave me the chance to see it pretty much on release here in terms of BBC videos. And BBC videos are how I watched a lot of Doctor Who back then, when it came to stories I'd either missed when they were on television or hadn't managed to get a hold of through tape trading when I was really into fandom in the late 80s through to the early 90s. So, yeah, it was a fun time.
Yes, I think it was a fun time. And the buzz and the reaction of a full story being found and the missing episodes being found, but in that wonderful slow motion of snail mail.
Yes.
I think it's Mark from Gin and Tardis that talks about getting a fax at work from someone to say to me that Cybermen had been found.
Wow.
So it wasn't that, everybody woke up on the internet and saw that Dalek's Master Plan episode 1 had been found sort of, within a 12-hour cycle. It was this sort of slow rollout over months, and that would have been a little bit frustrating, but also, a little bit more savouring of the moment, I guess.
Yeah, a little bit more comfortable, really.
Yeah, that too.
You didn't have to have an opinion on it 30 seconds later.
No. And I can remember the issue of the local fanzine after we'd had that screening, where they said, everybody, write in and tell us what you thought. And there were 3 pages of sort of, 1 or 2 paragraph comment reviews from just ordinary members who, for the most part, really, really liked it. But that was that was our version of X, of Bluesky, was waiting for the next fanzine to come, and someone had diligently typed out and literally copy and pasted all of these letters.
Well, speaking of reactions, let's get into our initial reactions or thoughts when we saw it the first time.
I was blown away by it the first time. I was just really, really impressed. I didn't know a lot about Tomb of the Cybermen at that time, other than the sort of couple of pages in the David Banks Cybermen book, which don't really talk so much about the story, and clearly were written with it being missing and not knowing all the details. But it did have, do you remember in that book, those wonderful colour pages of the paintings of the inside of the Cyber City?
Yeah, great.
So I had that, and that was all sort of all I knew, but seeing that all for the first time, seeing the great big Cybermen doors, seeing the motifs, seeing that tomb awakening scene actually playing out, which again, I'd seen one still photo of it, I think in the Doctor Who technical manual, I think it was.
God, yeah.
Just all these little image memories that you had on it, suddenly seeing it all played out. It would have been a very early Troughton that I would have seen. I wouldn't have seen a lot of Troughton by then. And what I had seen of Troughton, I think would have been all entirely season 6 Troughton. So I would have seen, I don't think any season 5 Troughton at this stage, let alone season 4 Troughton. That was unheard of.
Yeah, so you've not seen Victoria, I guess.
At most, I'd seen Evil of the Daleks Part 2, maybe, at some point.
Okay.
But like at most, this was kind of new, and seeing Troughton particularly was just like amazing. Like, oh, this is what Troughton's like in a new story. It was pretty mind-boggling, really. What about yourself?
Yeah, I really liked this, and I jotted down 4 reasons why that I could think of. I mean, 1, it was a Cybermen story, and I've always liked Cybermen. 2, it was a black and white, and my early fandom years had given me this appreciation of black and white television, which, yes, I think did tip over a bit into, oh, look at me, I like black and white TV, aren't I interesting and different to all my friends?
Yeah.
There was a bit of that. Number 3, I'd read the Target novel, so it was cool to see something I already knew playing out in front of me. And number 4, let's not bury the lead, it wasn't just a missing episode, it was a missing story.
Yeah.
This was the stuff of legend. It was talked about in fandom prior to this. Will they ever find some missing episodes? And they bloody went and found the whole story, and not just a story, a legendary story. And there was obviously this feeling of seeing something quite major that had been lost for so long. And it felt like so long because I was still so young at the time. So being lost for all those years was like, double my age or whatever it was. So that was very, very, very cool. Yeah, loved it.
Yeah, and that's a really important point you make there, Rob. Like, this had been missing my entire lifetime.
Yes.
So even though we can sort of look back now and go, well, it's been around for twice as long as it was missing, it was missing for my entire lifetime. But the other great thing was I should have said I did go to that meeting with my dad, and he did see it on broadcast in the UK, and then again when he got to Australia. So he had seen it twice.
When these things would happen for him, would he comment like, oh yeah, it's just like I remembered, or like, oh wow, that's not what I remembered it as? Did he have any sort of thoughts in that area?
Yeah, I can remember him sort of on the drive home. What do you think? He said, oh, it was really good. He said, oh, there were bits there that I absolutely remembered. Yes, they were just like I remembered it. And there were bits that I'd forgotten. But yeah, no, I was watching going, I remember seeing that.
Wow, that's so cool.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Let's get into it. The opening of this, Dave, is something we don't really associate with the classic era at all. It's like a new stepping on point for the series, and it seems they've specially shot it in that way rather than just being some happy coincidence that whatever the scriptwriter had written just seemed to fit that. We sort of enter the TARDIS through the doors and it feels massive. They're filming it almost like a New Who sort of shot. And then Victoria's asking these questions and we cut away to close-ups of the Doctor and Jamie replying, giving the audience the lowdown on who they are and what they do and what's going on. It's quite interesting and different for the era. It's almost like a promo for Doctor Who at the start of this.
Yeah, I've often said before that I think Barry Letts is the first producer who really sat down and said, right, we want a season opener. We commented on the last Gin and TARDIS about just how extraordinary it was that Galaxy 4 was, the big season opener, because it was terrible and badly made. And even, you go a year forward and you've got The Dominators, a trouble-plagued script and production that's not particularly exciting or special as the big season opener. And so, I stand by Barry Letts probably being the first to consciously across an era go, right, what are we doing for our season opener? We're going to have the Doctor arriving, we're going to have a new enemy, we're going to have the Daleks, etc. But you're right, here Innes Lloyd does have a proper jumping on point. You can watch it, and it's actually really quite sweet. It's not gripping, and I think that's something you'd do differently. Probably even 5 years later, you'd have the. I think 5 years later, you would reverse the scenes in the quarry with those scenes in the TARDIS. So you'd have you'd have the opening with the "We found the cyber doors." Cut to the TARDIS. TARDIS arrives. The two strands meet. But it is quite lovely.
Well, some fans even headcanon that the scene in the TARDIS doesn't even lead into Tomb directly, because they look at how Victoria acts in Tomb of the Cybermen, how she was in Evil of the Daleks, and they can't quite put them together. And so some fans do headcanon that, after that scene, they maybe went off and had another adventure before they went and landed on Telos. It's just a fan theory, headcanon sort of thing. Don't take it seriously out there, folks. I'm just mentioning that some fans do think that way.
No, well, we are in that period where they did sort of travel around in the TARDIS between adventures.
Yes.
So that yes. even if they didn't have an adventure, yes, it's quite possible there was quite a bit of travel time, and everybody had to sleep and change their clothes, and yeah, maybe.
Getting into the episode proper, though, there's this real Egyptian Valley of the Kings vibe at the start, which I love too. It's desolate, it looks great on film, the direction is really good, which is really exciting. There's some really interesting camera angles they use that make the quarry, or wherever they are, look really effective and really big. And it's an archaeological expedition. Oh, brilliant. This is just box tick, box tick, box tick for things that tickle my fancy, Dave. It gets off to a ridiculously promising start right from the get-go.
Yeah, I am not convinced about Maurice Barry's direction across this whole story, and we'll talk about some issues there, but his location work is spectacularly good. And
yes,
the black and white definitely, I think, helps the quarry look like something a bit more exotic. Because I was not sitting there going, of course, it's in a Doctor Who quarry. I was going, doesn't this landscape look great? Doesn't this look like a desolate alien world? And then the doors, and they're probably 6-inch doors that have been done, with camera trickery, forced perspective and the like. But they look like, oh, wow, what's that about? And then it leads into that scene in front of the doors where you get the first use of the Cybermen motif. And we're not doing anything here about what's going on here and who are the baddies going to be, and let's do a big reveal. It's called Tomb of the Cybermen. I think it's the only cyber story in the 60s, I think, to have Cybermen in the title, which is unusual. Unlike the Daleks, that is an unusual thing. And so I think the writers are going, right, we're going to say it. We're doing a cyber sequel. We're doing Cybermen. And from 3 minutes in, we're putting images of Cybermen on screen and playing with that motif and that image to build that sense of excitement. And I think that part one is possibly the strongest episode of the story and probably one of the best opening parters, certainly in the Troughton era, if not more generally, because it builds and builds and builds really, really well.
Yeah, and look, I think putting the Cybermen front and center is very deliberate because the Daleks are done. In the previous story, we've got rid of the Daleks, Terry Nation's taking them off to Hollywood or whatever.
Yeah.
And the Cybermen are going to be the new big bad. And so I think they're pulling out all stops and putting them in the title and doing this kind of story quite deliberately, I think, because of that.
Yeah, and even though they are putting the Cybermen front and centre in that we know instantly this is the Cyber City, these are the Cyber Tombs, and the Cybermen threat hangs over everything they do, we don't see an actual Cyberman until most of the way through part two, and we do get that part one cliffhanger reveal of the fake Cybermen. But regardless of that, the cyber presence feels strong across that whole first and frankly second part. It's a genuine sense that you could turn a light on and there's a Cyberman in the corner.
Yeah. I mentioned there's that real Egyptian Valley of the Kings vibe at the start, and the novel, as I recall, had even more of an Egyptian feel to it. Like in the novel, there are carvings of the Cybermen's history on the walls that sort of remind you of hieroglyphics, and the Cybermats are treated more like scorpions. There's this real Egyptian tomb, mummy rising from the dead sort of quality to it, all without being an on-the-nose sort of, we're doing a direct lift for that stuff. I think Toberman's also written as Turkish in it. It's been a long time since I read it, but I do remember it being a little more fleshed out and sort of playing on those Egyptian motifs.
Yeah, that's definitely a strong vibe there. And whilst it's not an Egyptian motif inside, it does feel like something of a wonder. And although you can see that opening control room is obviously a 1960s set with levers and probably a great big cardboard needle switching around that thing, I still think it's a really well designed set. I love the way the hatch sort of dominates. It must have been a huge set. For the small studios that they were filming in, it must have taken up a lot of that set. But it feels vast. When they go to other rooms, it doesn't feel like they've walked to another quarter of the studio. It feels like they've walked to another room, and you've just got these weird things going on. What's this room for? What's this room for? Weird stuff going on. It's filmed with the shadow. It's a really, really good setup.
Agreed. And just speaking of Cybermats, before I lose this thought, I've never heard a good explanation, Dave, for why they're discovered as these tiny things that fit in the palm of your hand, basically. They are very Scorpion-like, yet later on, they're the bigger ones we know from the later stories. I mean, did they grow, or did the production team think, oh, shit, we need them to be a bit bigger to work with when they're attacking the cast, so they just made some bigger ones? Are they a different model of Cyberman? I have no idea about that.
No, that's true, but the mini one does end up on Kaftan's shoulder.
Yes. Yes.
and maybe they couldn't do that with the full-sized one.
Yeah, true. Speaking of Kaftan, there is a real clanger from her. It's where she offers £50 to whoever can open the door. Are they still using pounds in the year 2500 or 3000 or whenever this is meant to be set? Is £50 a lot? You know, it's not a lot as we sit here today. I would have future-proofed that line, I think, Dave, with like a week's wages to whoever can open that door. That way you don't reveal what the figure is. You don't know what a week's wages is in the future, but it sounds like a decent amount if it's a week's wages. But yeah, £50 if you can open this door. I sort of laughed.
Yeah, it's funny. It probably wouldn't be something they would have thought of in the mid-60s, but we're probably not far off from people starting to use space terms, 50 credits or 50 space dollars, and, then you start to get Robert Holmes.
50 grotzits.
I was about to say grotzits, exactly, yeah. So, we're probably not quite there yet. We're still in a very innocent time for sci-fi.
Yeah, which is lovely. Yeah, definitely.
Let's keep going on the design, because I think that is one of the highlights of the story, and I suspect one of the reasons why this did live in the memory of fans of my dad's generation. I think it is a lot to do with that imagery, whether it's the cyber motifs on the wall, which there's some really good direction around them, whether it is the cyber tombs, whether it is the design of the cyber controller, and we can talk more about him if you'd like. Every sort of part of this set is really, really good. I'm not convinced that the tombs are necessarily filmed as well as they could be, although the model work and the switching between the models and the big studio set, and again, huge studio set. Look, that is very, very well done. I say the direction isn't quite as good, but, I'm also perhaps need to be realistic about what they could have done. I mean, they were going to put great big camera cranes and dollies up there. So, yeah, maybe it wasn't quite as possible as my vision would have been.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the height of the Cybermen, because it is really apparent in this story, and that's part of the design, I think. When I was a young fan in the 80s, there was always much written about the Cybermen being huge, being silver giants.
Yes.
And then you'd watch Earthshock or Attack of the Cybermen and be like, yeah, I'm not really seeing that. But in this one, they have cast properly big guys. And Troughton's so small, there's no camera trickery here. He's genuinely looking up at them in some scenes, especially the cyber controller. And it looks really impressive, like, oh, shit, wow, look at these guys.
Yeah, I mean, I remember watching Silver Nemesis, and Sylvester McCoy is not tall either. But they don't, I mean, they're taller than him, but they don't tower over him in Silver Nemesis. But yes, I had that same thought when I'm watching those exchanges. When the Cybermen tower over the humans, and particularly the Doctor, they tower. And there is that sense of them being powerful and implacable. And I think it is something that has been lost, really, since the end of the 60s. Because the stompy Cybermen from New Who, I would never have said that they tower over anybody either.
No, not at all. They're just normal-sized people, really.
Yeah. What do you make of the cyber controller himself, Rob?
I've never been that fussed on the design. Like, I know they want to do a different kind of design and make him stand out. I prefer when, we get things like the Cyber Leader with, the black, incorporating black into the headwear in some way, whether it's in Revenge, where it's a lot of the headwear is done in black, or in the 80s. Yeah, I'm not that sold on it. Like, he doesn't have a lot of adornment either. But he is still very big. He's bigger than the others, and very impressive, and that still is something I like.
Yeah, it's the first attempt to give the Cybermen a proper authority figure. That there had been, de facto cyber leaders, if you want to call that, in the 10th Planet and Moon Base, insofar as they gave the orders. But they weren't a distinguishable cyber leader as we think of them now. So I think as a first attempt to do it, it works very well. I think it is useful for plot reasons. I think that the desire to give him a sleek look does work. I think that the concept of the larger brain case, I get what they're going for. I don't think they quite have the tech to make it work. And I suspect it is one of those things where they had this concept of, it's going to have flashing lights and do this, this, and this, and under studio lights with, a cheap battery and black and white film, 425 lines or whatever. Just none of that kind of translates, which is a shame. But I see what they're going for, but that part maybe doesn't quite work. But I love the concept. And compared to the cyber planner that turns up in the next two cyber stories, well, he's way above that.
Exactly right. Another piece of design, and this is costume design, and this is all I've written as my note, so I'll just give it to you. Troughton in Hartnell's cloak looks cool.
Yes.
And I don't know if it really is Hartnell's cloak, but it looks like Hartnell's cloak.
Yes. No, that is very, very cool. Can I talk about a bit of an issue I had here, Rob?
Sure, go on.
So I watched this story and I'm going, there's some great design work here. The plot's working for me. It's chilling. It's Egyptian mystery, all the rest of it. There were too many times, though, when I've looked at a scene or an effect and gone, oh, wow, that's ropey. And I'm not talking about ropey compared to 2025 or ropey compared to, 1985. I'm saying I've seen Doctor Who of the 1960s. I've watched a lot of Doctor Who of the 1960s. And there are too many moments in this that just look ropey by Doctor Who's standards. Whether it's very obvious Kirby wire several times, whether it's incredibly obvious that Cyberman has popped off screen with the live human actor Cyberman to go get the empty dummy Cyberman to then throw around. There's a lot of stuff like that where I'm just like, no, this is not, well, it's good for the day. It's like, no, Doctor Who can be better than this. Like there were a disappointing number of really ropey effects.
Yeah, well, that bit where he's got the fake Cyberman, he's holding it above his head, and I think that it is on a Kirby wire, isn't it? Because when he throws it, I think the wire pulls it away.
There's two different ones. There's one where he uses the Kirby wires to lift the Cyberman up, and then he throws and it's the dummy Cyberman that lands on the console. But there is one where he does walk off screen and then walks back on with the dummy.
Yes, it's like something out of the Goodies, obviously.
Yeah.
Honestly,
yes. Yes, that was disappointing, and that's I think where my mixed view of Maurice Barry's direction comes from. There's some stuff where he's done some really good use of the motifs and the sets, but there are also moments where I go, mate, you just said near enough's good enough for that, didn't you?
Yeah. Well, look, while we're in this direction of being a little negative about a story we obviously like, I'll also say the story is a bit simplistic in some ways, Dave. The Cybermen wake up, they capture our heroes escape and shut the hatch. The Cybermen apparently can't open their own hatch, so they stand around for a bit, then they go back to sleep. It does the job for an exciting kids' adventure of the week, but it's not a very intricately plotted or very deep sort of story either.
I can say when I watched that at the age of 11, everything in that plot made sense. Perfect sense.
Right.
The Doctor's plan to lock him in the revitalising thing and then, basically overcook him. I was like, obvious, that's a really good plan. How would he know that the cyber controller could smash his way out the front door? All those sort of things made absolute perfect sense to me. The Cybermen's plan made perfect sense to me. They're like, we'll go to sleep and wait until humans are smart enough to be converted into Cybermen and then they'll pass our test and we'll capture them. Made perfect sense to me. Yeah, watching it as a 40-something-year-old, I do sit there and go, you didn't have a lock on the inside? You didn't have a doorknob on the inside? Or, you wake up with barely enough power to function with your revitalizer upstairs? That seems a bit dumb. Yes, I can absolutely see those issues, but I actually don't care because in between me going, oh, that effect was a bit ropey or that plot device was a little bit, dodgy, I could go, I don't care because I'm just rolling with this really creepy, eerie monster adventure.
Yeah. Oh, look, there's plenty of that in there. I mean, as you say, the whole concept of the tomb is to have people prove they're smart enough to get to the Cybermen. And then the Cybermen convert the first person, and it's Toberman who can barely communicate. And they pick him, to come into their smart people ranks. So,
I also do quite like, and I'm actually quite genuinely amused by the fact that on the one hand, there's this complex logic problem that has to be solved to open the tombs and use out which control it should be used. And look, I think there is probably a little bit of a breakdown between the script intent and the set design, because in the end it's kind of just pulling three levers. But I do like the fact that when the space engineer comes in and has to open the tomb, he's like, well, this wire's got to go somewhere, so let's just kind of follow the wire and work out which one trips the circuit, and it's this one, it's that lever, do it. And he solved the problem in a different way. And that doesn't invalidate the fact that there was one way to solve it with a logic thing. The Cybermen could well say, well, there are multiple ways to solve this problem, and if they've got significant technological knowledge, they can also open the tomb. I just like those different approaches, and also it means the plot doesn't just stop while they're all downstairs.
Yeah, I agree. I like that scene too. Like, we were showing some real science, really. As simple as it was, following the lead.
Yeah.
To open that. Look, we were a bit negative there. Let's swing it back the other way. We get the very famous and very nice speech in this about the Doctor's family and how they sleep in his mind until he wants to remember them, which is possibly, I will say this, Dave, some of the best dialogue in all of classic Doctor Who. I've always liked that line, and I think for anyone who has lost both their parents and some time has moved on, and I'm in this category, I'll freely admit, I take something extra away from that now. The way we can and do eventually let people sleep in our minds, and we're not dwelling on them, driving ourselves crazy thinking about them every minute of the day, but they're always there if we want to recall them too. It's a really beautiful bit of dialogue. I love when it gets pulled out in clip shows. I think it's one of the best bits in all of classic Doctor Who, full stop.
Yeah, it is gorgeous, as you say. It's lovely that in what is basically a monster story, they do, for no necessary plot reason, just stop to have this character moment. I think it's really good that they've chosen to do that. And I think it is good to link this story to previous stories and remind the audience that, yeah, Victoria did lose her father in the last story. She is now an orphan. And rather than just being, oh, well, I'm now on another, nice jolly adventure with this guy called the Doctor, going from week to week with lots of fun, there is that sense of, look, I'm glad I'm with you and thank you for taking me, but I miss Dad. And the Doctor comforting her. Yeah, it actually does work.
Yeah, and that comes from this story, so a big tick there. Should we talk about the Doctor?
I think we should. Every time I watch this, I watch it with more knowledge, both of my own experience of watching Tomb of the Cybermen and also with all the stuff that's been written about what the Doctor's doing. And I almost take away a slightly different take every time I do it, because I think there is a wonderful level of ambiguity in the way that Troughton plays the Doctor here.
Mm-hmm. We might be going in a similar direction. Do you want to go on, or shall I dive in?
No, you dive in from here.
All right, because people talk about Sylve being the Dark Doctor and the Master Manipulator. Well, I give you Pat Troughton. In this one, he knows the dangers of the team going into the tomb, but he helps them anyway. He gets Klieg to prove he's nuts before letting him get killed. He rewires the tomb so that if any other innocent archaeologists come along in the future, they'll get zapped as well. He seems to have no beef with them apparently leaving Toberman's body on the front doorstep at the end of the story. Despite coming across as quite a nice and charming man most of the time, you look at some of these moments and you think, Pat really has no to give in this at times. It's really quite extraordinary. And I know I'm playing it up for laughs, but all those things happened.
I have 2 points to make there, because I do agree basically with where you're going for the most part. The first is that the Troughton Doctor is incredibly callous and has a massive body count when it comes to just aliens that he's wiped out.
Yeah.
I think that is in some ways the natural result of him being the Doctor for the monster era. If the format of the show at this point is that every story a different monster turns up to menace whoever in some isolated location, then they're monsters. They're not people, they're monsters, they're right to be destroyed. And so you sort of get the Doctor acting in that way. I think that's a natural result of the format of the show. But when you compare him to McCoy, I think, yes, there are some contrasts to be made. What I think is different and interesting about it is that if this was a McCoy story, at the end there would have been that moment where Ace, would have confronted him and said, "This was your plan all along, wasn't it? The moment you saw those doors, you knew the end point was the Cybermen destroyed and electrocuting it and shutting it down. Like, you knew this was where this was going for the first moment, and people died. Yes, Ace, but, that's what was necessary, big picture."
Yeah.
Whereas here, I don't think, but I'm not sure, that this Doctor walks into that cyber city and from halfway through episode 1, he's saying, right, the end point of this is that we've gone down, we've found the Cybermen, we've put them out of action, and then I'm going to electrify all this and I'm going to shut this thing down. I don't get the sense that he's got the grand master plan that McCoy would have, or whether he's kind of rolling with things as they go. I've watched this now many times. I'm not entirely sure whether he gives Klieg the answers to get down in the tomb because he's saying, well, I need to get down there. My plan is we've got to get down there, so I'm going to nudge this along. Or whether he is just he can't help himself. Like, Klieg's like, 2 + 2 = 5. No, it's not, it's 4. Whoops. I don't know which of those it is or somewhere in between. But I do like that you highlighted the conversation he has with Klieg, which you're right, is absolutely brutal. It's, okay, before I let you die, are you just irredeemably insane? Oh, yes, you are. Well, I will not warn you, therefore, that a Cyberman is sneaking up behind you, and I'll just let him kill you in front of
Yes. It's extraordinary when you think about it. Yeah. The rest of the TARDIS team, Jamie, I think, is solid in this without being too remarkable. I mean, he's got the comedy down with Pat. There's that famous hand-holding scene, which is just played so well. He gets a bit of action to do. It's not a story, though, where I think, wow, this is a tour de force for Jamie, but it's not a bad Jamie story either. Maybe middle-of-the-road Jamie for me.
No, I think that's right, and I think the production team has correctly made the decision that this is Victoria's first full-time story as an established companion, and therefore she needs a few more moments to shine, whereas Jamie sort of just really gets to be a function of the plot. Now, Fraser Hines being a function of the plot is still great to watch, don't get me wrong. But, what does Jamie do in this? He does the things the plot needs him to do to move the story along.
Yeah, exactly right. Should we move on to Victoria then? What are your thoughts on her?
I can remember growing up in fandom in the 90s particularly, where season 5 was the great monster season and the Doctor, Victoria and Jamie was the great TARDIS team.
Yeah.
And in some ways that's because all the stories we could watch, Crotons, Mind Robber, War Games, Dominators, they were all season 6 stories. Like the Troughton era was for us season 6 at that point. And so we didn't know how good that was. And we had this mysterious missing monster season of classic stories. Tomb, Web of Fear, Fury from the Deep, Abominable Snowman, the Ice Warriors. Now we know that some of those aren't as good as we maybe thought they were. Some of them are as good as we thought they were. But there's been a real pushback as we've discovered more of season 5 against Victoria. And I understand that pushback. I have certainly also been one who's gone, yeah, Victoria is not quite as good as legend says, and my God, Zoe's so much better. And yes, the Doctor, Zoe and Jamie is the classic TARDIS team from that point of the show. Yeah. But I can see why that pushback took a while to happen, because I think this is probably Deborah Watling's best performance and probably the best writing for Victoria that she gets across season 5.
Interesting. She's certainly, and I touched on this earlier, she's certainly adapted well to the future, even if she still has questions which are there more for the audience, like asking the Doctor how old he is. Even the clothes she's put on, they would have to be remarkably different to what she was previously wearing. Yeah. And we get her feeling a bit odd about how short the skirt is. And I thought, well, bugger the skirt, what about the panties you have on? Putting aside whose they were previously, they'd be nothing like the underwear of the mid-19th century, which she would have been wearing up until just I don't know, the day before or something. I did a deep dive on that, Dave. They would have been like long pantaloon type things, and she's gone from that to basically modern underwear. You know, I know the show wouldn't want to go too granular, but if this was a modern episode, I think there'd be a lot more references to just how weird everything must seem to her. But this doesn't really touch on that. And some of the things she really picks up with ease, maybe a little too easily, like guns. Like, oh yeah, this is a gun, I'll use the gun. What?
Yeah, and it's interesting that she's there alongside Jamie, who's from another century or so, even earlier in history, and would have another century's less knowledge of modern things. Somehow, I think Jamie gets away with it because he's wandering around in a kilt going cricketer and sort of, you know, all the time. So there's sort of the sense of, oh yeah, that's right, he's from the 18th century, you know, that's okay. Even when he is looking at things like laser guns and just picking them up very comfortably, or, you know, talking about concepts that he never could. I think that sort of that image of Jamie carries you through that in a way that maybe would be even less realistic, whereas because she's literally called Victoria and she does have this sort of, I'm from the Victorian era, just sort of, you know, wetness about her, you notice that discontinuity a bit more.
Yeah. And again, I think, you know, they do have some stuff in there which does show that she is a fish out of water, but I think it would be played up a lot more in the modern era. Yeah.
No, absolutely. I want to talk about the writing of the other characters, Rob. And
yes.
I'm going to bring this up not to kick the story, but to do some contrasting and have a chat. Because I know that there are fans who push back very hard against the role of Roy Stewart as Toberman in this. And I don't think you can hide the fact that the slave character and you know, really portrayed as a dumb slave is the black guy. I think that is something you can't shy away from. You certainly can't shy away from it in a story where the crazy megalomaniac is a German, the cruel and heartless person is an Arab, the sexy adventurer is an American, the doddery old professor is an Englishman. I think you can't hide away from the fact that there are some stereotypes at play, and the black slave is by far the worst and the most obvious. I find it fascinating, though, because only a couple of cyber stories ago, you had a black man as an astronaut at the centre in the 10th planet. When you go forward literally to just the other end of this season, we don't even have to go into season 6 or season 7 or the 70s. We just have to go to the other end of season 5, and you've got The Wheel in Space, which has a properly ethnically mixed crew. It has a properly gender mixed crew where you have people like Gemma Corwin as leaders and scientists, and Zoe Herriot, but you know, you have multiple strong women characters in positions of authority and knowledge. You have different ethnicities. It's just a real odd thing to me that between, you know, 10th Planet isn't perfect, but there's an evolution of, well, let's show the future in almost Gene Roddenberry terms of proper equality that evolves through the 60s, and I think Wheel in Space is a great example. And yet there's just this clangor in the middle in Tomb of the Cybermen, and that interests me more than I you know, sit there and go, well, I condemn you.
Well, I've got some things to say here, and I think this is probably the part of the conversation everyone who voted for this story has probably been waiting for us to get into.
Maybe they just like Cybermen, Rob.
Well, maybe they do. Because even when we announced we were covering this story, someone on our Facebook page commented, yes, the story set in the future where there are black slaves. Yikes. And I think that's pretty indicative of an idea that persists in Doctor Who fandom, and if anything seems to become more entrenched over time. And I actually think it's a bit of a simplistic reading than what's actually happening on screen. And there is some nuance to this, so let me get into it.
No, absolutely.
I said to that guy that Toberman is more of a servant than a slave. He's even referred to multiple times in the story as a servant. Servants aren't unusual in Doctor Who, New Who or Classic. You got Chip with Lady Cassandra, you got Clayton with Ashilda, you've got Kondo and Solon, Nimrod in Ghostlight's a servant, Matilda with Lady Jane Grey and the Sarah Jane Adventures, and so on. So what makes people conclude that Toberman is the odd man out and is a slave rather than a servant, despite being constantly referred to as just a servant? You know, because the serial never suggests he's enslaved or lacks legal freedom. which is what slavery literally is. And if we're going to attach the word slave to what's going on, I think we need to get this right. There's simply no dialogue, no plot point, nothing at all that suggests that Kaftan owns him. You know, the story doesn't support that reading. If the criticism, though, is about the portrayal, that's the different conversation. I think Toberman is largely used as a strongman. He does have very little dialogue. He spends most of the story serving the white characters. These are very valid things to discuss, Dave, you know, and viewed through a modern lens, the optics are uncomfortable in ways I don't think they would have been as much in 1967. But I think that's a very different criticism to saying the character is literally a slave, because I don't think he is a slave.
You're right. That wording is probably, or certainly, incorrect. He's definitely, I think, some sort of underclass, though.
Yeah.
And I think that the evolution of the character, where initially he was meant to be deaf and therefore, you know, semi-mute, which, I mean, you know, again, a whole different problem that, you know, I acknowledge. That sort of led him to not having those lines or having those very simplistic ones, or the Doctor almost talking down to him in a way that you don't expect the Doctor to do. So none of that helps, although I do get your point. But I come back to, if this was an aberration in the story, you might go, okay, this was just unfortunate casting, or something got out of control and it missed it. In a story where, as I say, the baddies are the uber logical and nasty German and the shifty and sly Arab, and you know, the doddery old Englishman, etc., I think you have to say that there was a certain level, well, a very high level, of what we'll now call racial coding that clearly wasn't commented on at the time. I don't think it was commented all that much in the early 90s, although the Tubman discussion did happen at that stage. As I say, I don't sit here and go, well, that's it, that's the end of Two with the Cybermen. I just find it fascinating that a show that can be much better than this, in stories within 12 months either side of it, was this just kind of clumsy and loose and callous.
Yeah, and again, that comes back to the portrayal. I think the portrayal is dodgy, and I think the portrayal is uncomfortable. I completely think that. And it came up when this, I assume a listener of ours, given they're on our page, talked about there being black slaves in the story, and I'm thinking, no, you know, if Toberman were played by someone like David Prowse, like a muscle man of the era who was white, but everything else was the same, would we describe him as a slave? You know, I don't think we would. Yet everything would have been the same, just aside from race.
No.
You know, so that's where I sort of arc up a bit with the word slave, but the portrayal, yes, very, very dodgy territory.
Yeah, and it is certainly clear in the script and in the story that Toberman has some form of, if not affection, certainly loyalty to Kaftan.
I think Kaftan has affection for him. Honestly.
Yeah, I'm less sold on that.
Okay.
I think that you could absolutely recast that relationship with a very different lens and have quite an interesting one there. But yeah, yes, there is more going on there, because in the end, it's the Cybermen killing Kaftan that motivates Toberman to arc up and push back against the Cybermen and recognise them as evil, and to the point that he's willing to give up his life to stop them. So, you know, that is not a slave owner-slave relationship.
Unless there's some Stockholm syndrome going on, perhaps. But
yeah. So I don't think it's designed to be that at all.
No, I don't.
It is certainly not a relationship of equals either, which I guess is, you know, all we need to say.
Yeah, very fair.
Couple of quick things, Rob. I think that not only do the Cybermen look great here, but I think this is the first time they really lean into that concept of cyber conversion as being the big threat. And I think it's really interesting. I remember an article in DWM in around about issue 195-ish, talking about fond memories of Doctor Who magazine, where it made the point that the cliffhanger for part 2 you would expect to be the Cybermen break out of their tombs. But the actual cliffhanger comes a few moments later, where he says, "You will be like us." And we start to introduce into cyber law properly this idea of cyber conversion, which I think is a really important step for the monster.
Yes, agreed.
I asked myself the question, is it a base under siege when it's actually the Doctor and his friends who are besieging?
Good question.
I mean, they can leave at any time. Now, the Doctor doesn't want them to for plot reasons, and they can't go back to the spaceship because Timo Captain Kirk says they can't. But they are actually not trapped in that location. They could leave at any time. It's the Cybermen who are trapped. I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, there are sort of two bases, I guess. So they're sort of in one base that's being besieged by the Cybermen wanting to come up the drain pipe to them.
Yes, yeah, I suppose, yes, maybe. And they do send the Cybermats. The final thing I wanted to say before we get to our final thoughts is that this is an extraordinarily downbeat ending.
Yeah.
There's really no sense of that, well, we've defeated the monster and we're all happy and we're going to go away on, we'll be back in a week's time with another wacky adventure. Literally, there are bodies lying around. We've kind of done a pretty shit job of everything here. Everybody's sad. Then the Cybermat comes into view and you're like, oh, okay, maybe the Doctor hasn't been that effective after all because, the Cybermat's going to do something. And it finishes on that still image of the Cyber motif, almost to say, yeah, we'll be back. People have died, but no, we'll be back. We're still here. We'll always be here. It's a really grim ending.
Yeah, and I like it all the more for that, actually.
Oh, totally.
Yeah, very good stuff. So, Dave, I think we should wrap up on this one. Do you want to give us your final thoughts on Tomb of the Cybermen?
This is a very good and enjoyable Doctor Who story. Is it completely flawless? Of course it's not. Nothing is completely flawless. It certainly has got some issues with the script that holds up very well as a kid, but you can pick faults in it as an adult. It certainly has too many ropey effects, and that is to its shame and its detriment. But I actually don't care, because it is one of those stories that starts well, is moody, is exciting, had me, not scared. I wasn't hiding behind the sofa at my age watching, the Tomb of the Cybermen. But I was sitting there going, this is a bit tense. I feel the tension. I feel a little bit uncomfortable. I feel what the director and the scriptwriter and the production team want me to feel. It then goes on, we get some great sets. We get some great set-piece moments. We get some cool Cybermen doing Cybermen things. We get lots of action moments. And we get a bleak ending. And even though I was sitting there too many times going, oh, that's really bad, and it almost took me out, I then said, I don't care, because I'm bloody loving this.
Yeah, very, very good. Cards on the table for me, this story isn't as magical to me as the first time I popped on that VHS and was almost shaking with excitement that I was seeing a missing story, and it was a legendary missing story. I've seen it too many times since, and I've seen too many other stories, and I've grown up as a person and as a Doctor Who fan for it to ever feel like it did when I was 16 back in the early 90s. But I think it's still really good episodic 1960s TV. It's paced very traditionally. We get to the end of that first episode you mentioned. We see a Cyberman, or at least we think we do. It's just the practice dummy. We get to the end of the second episode and the Cybermen are rampaging. You will be like us. You mentioned that as well. We get to the end of the third episode and Klieg has apparently shot the Doctor. And all of that is Doctor Who as we know it by the numbers. And I don't mean that in a disparaging way. This is 1960s Doctor Who. It's just 4 episodes long. It's a lovely length for 60s Doctor Who. You can put it on for someone, and assuming they're in the mindset for 1960s sci-fi and all the pros and the cons of that, and being made on a shoestring budget, we've talked a bit about that too. I think they'll have a perfectly fine time with it. I find it a really likable thing, even if, as I say, I just can't quite recapture how I felt about it almost 35 years ago now.
No, I think that's a very fair assessment.
Well, thank you very much. Well, that was Tomb of the Cybermen. If you have some thoughts on it, why not write in and let us know? You know all the ways to get in touch with us. Listener feedback, Dave. Shall we rip into some of that?
Let's do it.
Alrighty. On our Fall of the RTD2 Empire episode, BT Knight says, a rather grim ending. The vibe of this last version of Doctor Who, with the exception of the more unconventional episodes, has felt very by the numbers, with its very simple characters, clear attempts to mimic the MCU, and its Netflix lighting syndrome. It's the most corporate the show has ever felt. I was excited at the time, but I think it's a harsh lesson that firstly the same tricks don't generally work twice, But also, Doctor Who probably isn't meant to compete with the likes of big-budget blockbuster franchises.
Yep, very fair. We have on the same topic from Martin Wells. I liked RTD, and he had some great episodes, but he was let down by the bad story arcs. Neither series made any overall sense. For example, 1. The whole Who is her mum arc. That was just bizarre. Turned out she was just normal and there was no mystery at all. And 2. Nearly 30 minutes of Where's Poppy as the climactic ending. Both series were very disappointing overall. A bit of a disaster, as it was meant to be the big new start with Disney. That came to an end quick.
It sure did. Continuing on this topic, Shane Gordon says, when I first heard the news re no more Doctor Who in the immediate future, my first thoughts were, here we go again. I was once in the camp of, I'd watch any Doctor Who no matter what. Maybe it's age, but I've mellowed a bit because now I'm sort of welcoming a break in production. Unlike in 89, I'm not stressed that the show will never come back. I'm now confident it will. When it does come back, I hope it continues on with its extended previous history. No hard reboot for me, but it needs to tell good stories. I agree with Rob's call. I want the history kept, but yes, to a clean-skinned showrunner.
That, I think, is the majority view, Rob. They're more on your wavelength than mine, but that's okay. A few people have agreed with me, and that makes me feel validated.
I'm a populist, Dave. I'm a populist.
Oh, I always knew that. From Sammy Santine. Dear Rob and Dave, hope you guys are well. Is this what 1989 felt like? I figure you guys would know. I don't know if I'm in the minority here, but this not having Doctor Who on the air makes me sad. I personally want a soft reboot if it comes back. So, yes, Rob, I agree with you. Yes. But whatever the new vision is, whenever it comes out, I will watch it and see if it is for me or not. But one suggestion, let's try and ditch the Doctor numbering. I just think that it might be a bit much for some new fans. But other than that, let's not overthink it. Let whoever takes over have their vision. Finally, thank you, Russell, Julie, Jane, Phil, and the team at Bad Wolf. Thanks to all the cast and crew who have worked on Doctor Who over the last 21 years. If it wasn't for that passion that made you all so determined to bring it back to television, I wouldn't be writing this letter. I certainly wouldn't have all this Doctor Who merch or my lovely Doctor Who friends, nor would I have even considered listening to this and to many other podcasts. Here's to whatever the next iteration of Doctor Who is. Good point, Sammy. Good point.
Well, is this what 1989 felt like, Dave?
I think that there are similarities in that it is the slow, unclear cancellation. It is just, well, it's not being made now. Oh, it's not being made for a bit longer. Oh, the production team's been sacked. Oh, we're not quite sure what's going on. I think there are similarities, but going back to what we said about the discovery of Tomb, it's happening in quick time here, not slow time.
Yeah, and I think there's more of a plan than in 89. In 89, it was like, well, or going into 90 or 91, let's say, it was more like, well, people might come up to the BBC with ideas and want to do something, but it was very random. Whereas this is like, we're going to have a tender. And as I say, it might be before the end of this year. And there will be people pitching for it. BBC Studios is pitching for it. Who knows who else will pitch for it? That is a very definite thing that's happening. It was a bit more ad hoc back in 89, 90, 91.
Yes, that's probably fair as well.
Yeah. Alrighty, on our ultimate Shooty Gatwa cold take, Damien Alexander says, Gentlemen, in my working life, I travel globally and often spend extended periods of time away from home. I find your podcast, including repeat listening, a constant companion. Your recent overview of Gatwa was excellent. Whilst I have stronger, more negative opinions, it was great to see you saw some good stories buried under the various agendas and plot holes. I still hold my stance that the Doctor should never be sexualized or be political. It's one of the strengths and differences of the character and is unlike anything else out there. Dragging Who into the realm of other series dilutes its strengths. Thank you again, and I will continue to eagerly await each of your episodes.
Thank you, Damien. That's lovely to hear. And look, I don't disagree with your overriding contention. Maybe I've accepted it more, I guess.
Yeah, maybe.
Peter Thompson on the same topic says, I think the problem isn't with the mysteries, it's how RTD did them. Shows like Wednesday make the mysteries affect characters. Actions have consequences. Sometimes the show forgets that more personal storytelling can work better. For example, one thing they could have done is have Mrs. Flood working in unit, e.g. as its scientific advisor. Fits with the character, and the Doctor could end up meeting her, even helping her, so the reveal of the Rani actually had a bit more impact.
That would have been very cool. The only thing at the back of my mind, that fanish thing at the back of my mind, wouldn't the Doctor recognise her? Wouldn't he get a vibe from her? But aside from that, that would have actually been a great storyline.
It would.
Cybermen strikes on the same topic of Gatwa. While I don't think a rewatch will alter my overall assessment of the era, I think it is better when you are distanced from the weekly agitation of the showrunner after each episode.
That is true too. Talking about our List Makers episode on top biographies and autobiographies, Dave Young says, "Hi Rob and Dave, following on from your List Makers on biogs and autobiogs, I am currently rereading Who on Earth is Tom Baker. Quite right that there are some shocking moments in it, but still very humorous in places. I was lucky to get a signed copy when it first came out and met Tom, who was doing a public signing at my local Waterstones. I'll always remember the boy in front of me who requested that Tom say jelly babies, as he wanted to use it in a local college broadcast. Tom gave me a wide-eyed look and then dutifully obliged with gusto. Still loving the podcast. Thanks, Dave."
I love little stories like this from fandom.
Yeah.
You know, I remember once when Al No, he was one of the original Diddly Dum guys, talked about meeting Tom Baker at a signing. And he said, "Can you sign this to Al?" And I think Tom looked up at him and said, "You are Al?" And it just made Al's year that Tom Baker said that to him. Something so simple. Yeah.
Yep, nice.
All right. On our Don't Read the Comments episode about the passing of Justin Richards, Nick Pickering says, "Just listen to your beautiful tribute to Justin Richards on Don't Read the Comments. Thanks, Rob. I'm sure everyone who listens to it will appreciate your kind and considered words. I haven't read the negative comments you mentioned and have no intention of giving them any of my time. As my own tiny tribute, I will listen to The Bloodless Soldier today. I downloaded it a long time ago and never got around to listening to it." Well, I hope you enjoyed that one, Nick.
On our Top Comfort Stories episode of The List Makers, Douglas Stanford Grandy says, "Great podcast. I've been a listener for years, but only just started to follow you on Facebook. I enjoy all the shows you guys put on, and The List Makers is my favourite segment. It's too bad it's only 20 minutes. When I'm finished listening, I'm a little bummed out. I have to wait another month for the next one. I'm sorry. For what it's worth, here's my top 5 comfort stories. And, by the way, I'm listening from the city of Oshawa in Ontario, Canada."
Oh, wow. I love it when people tell us where they live. It's great.
It is. It's cool, isn't it?
Yeah.
So Douglas's list. Number 5, Rose. Such a great start to the modern series. A great jumping on point for a new fan. And for me, a comfort episode. 4, The Keeper of Traken / Legopolis / Castrovolva. A bit of a cheat having 3 stories in one spot, but it's a trilogy and reminds me of my early days as a fan. Although I might not sit down and watch all 3 at once, any of them are pure comfort for me. Number 3, An Unearthly Child Episode 1. Maybe because I've seen it so many times, but the 23 minutes just flows by very fast, and I never tire of watching it once a year on a certain date. Number 2, The 5 Doctors, brings back lots of memories and is just fun to watch. Number 1, Pyramids of Mars, the first one to pop in my head when you said top 5 comfort stories. One of my favourite Baker stories and would make my top 10 list of best stories overall. Just a joy to watch and, well, very comforting.
I look at that top 5 and think I could have taken that and just read that out on the episode and made a case for all of that.
Yeah, there's some great picks
even without it being my list.
Some great picks there, absolutely.
Yeah, good one. And welcome to our Facebook group too. Frankie Norton says, "I listened to List Makers this afternoon and very much enjoyed it as usual. I guessed both number 1 picks, although I was pretty surprised a certain Davo story wasn't on Rob's list. But once you explained your reasoning, I totally got why. Also, I was thrilled and surprised at the end of the ep to hear one of my ideas come out of Turlo's hat. So exciting. Definitely looking forward to next month's ep.
Thank you, Frankie, and I'm not shocked you picked both of our top stories. I think that's part of getting to know us as presenters, is you know those sort of things about us.
For sure.
Jonathan Riddle says, with a stellar cast and reliable quality, one could make a top 5 comfort viewing list from just the Pertwee era. So I will. Number 5, Terror of the Autons. Number 4, The Curse of Peladon. Number 3, Planet of the Daleks. Number 2, The Sea Devils. And number 1, The Time Warrior. I respect that list, Jonathan.
Yeah, you would. You would, Dave. How a Mouse says, The Five Doctors was the first VHS we owned, and probably the first time I'd seen all of those Doctors, so it was basically a gateway into the whole series. There's also something about 60s Who that makes it a comfort watch. Those long, slow burn stories like Dalek Invasion of Earth and The War Games, which are so immersive and have that magic of early black and white television. It'd be interesting to hear what younger fans look for in Comfort Who, when the feel and the pace of New Who is so different.
Good point.
Yeah. If you're a New Who fan, write in, let us know.
And finally, on this topic, Joe, aka Theta Sigma 1969, says, my go-to comfort Doctor Who story is Pyramids of Mars. This has come up a few times now.
It has.
It was one of the first videos I purchased, so I watched it quite a lot in my younger days, and so nostalgia has a lot to do with this pick. I love watching this on a cold winter night with the heater on. It just brings back so many memories. Other picks, 5 Doctors, 3 Doctors, Sea Devils, Tomb of the Cybermen, Seeds of Doom, and Horror of Fang Rock. Seeds of Doom, comfort viewing? Look, it's my favourite Tom story, but comfortable? It's grim.
Yeah, wow.
Love it, Joe. Love it.
And finally, this is an interesting topic. I might need to give it a little bit of explanation. Dave, you and I on the podcast have talked about whether Doctor Who should be rebooted when it comes back. I'm of the view, no, keep the history. You're like, we could do a reboot. That would be fun. Paul Mars, the author, recently put out a video talking about why he thinks the show should be rebooted. And I threw this out on our socials saying, look, I'm of this view, but Paul Mars kind of agrees with Dave. Look at what he says in this video. So all these comments are about Paul Mars's video and whether Doctor Who should be rebooted, but also about how we have these opposing views as well. So that's the explanation. Daniel Burnett says, it could definitely work, but it's just so unnecessary. You can achieve more or less the same results by starting with a new Doctor and not just mentioning anything that came before. At all. When the Daleks show up, a simple, I've met them before, is more than sufficient. Pretty much what Eccleston did. Then you have the benefit of dipping into the history later, if you want, or not. And you don't piss off all the people who are already invested in the show. It can be totally new and fresh and still be part of the history.
All of that is true. Andrew Foxley says, it feels so unnecessary to reboot when you can just keep moving forwards and tell new stories without constantly referring back to the past. It's something RTD's original run did so well, building its own new continuity and characters around the basic framework of the Doctor and the TARDIS. Stephen Moffat more or less did the same in 2010. I wish the more recent series had followed suit. Doctor Who is at its best when it gives us new things to explore and enjoy, not constantly wheeling out familiar faces all the time for the sake of it.
That's a good point. We don't need to go back to the past all the time. Yeah. Brett Hosking says, I think they should have rebooted after the 50th, personally. All the changes they wanted to make from there, the Master and the Doctor randomly changing gender after 42 and 55 years respectively, the Timeless Child, Shooty being an LGBT plus hornbag, flies a lot better without trying to connect the character to Hartnell, Pertwee, Tom Baker or Troughton. If you want to reboot it and make the Doctor a lesbian penguin Eskimo from the planet Glubus, I'll go with it, providing the writing is good and it captures the spirit of the original.
Yeah, it's the writing that really makes the difference in the end for all these ideas, isn't it?
I think so.
Rorschach Dominic says, yeah, I disagree about the whole reboot as it just insults everyone. However, I do think the next series should be the 16th, 17th Doctor having adventures and encountering new enemies and new planets. Maybe the Daleks and or the Cybermen in a special, but that's it.
And finally, Matt Barber says, I think a reboot means something different in the context of Doctor Who. Ultimately, there's a limit to how much you can strip from the series before it becomes unrecognisable as Doctor Who. Or, if you do, it rapidly, within a year or two, snaps back to the status quo. Also, in a sense, Doctor Who has repeatedly had reboots of varying severity, pretty much every time the producer/showrunner/lead actor changes. I think it would be sensible to emulate Rose and to start from a new beginning, but it'll never be a full reboot.
Yep, that's the sort of well thought through contention I'd expect from Dr. Matt Barber.
Indeed. And look, folks, there were a lot more comments this month. I'm sorry we haven't got to all of them. That gave us a nice selection of them across many, many topics. Thank you, as always, to everyone who writes in month to month. It's really great to have your support here.
Absolutely.
Into what have we been watching? A quieter month for me, Dave. I got finally into Small Profits. That's the Mackenzie Crook piece that our UK friends have been raving about for most of this year. And it's a lovely little show, which seems to be Crook's calling card now. He does stuff that is borderline twee, but he manages to still be really good. His reboot of Wurzel Gummidge and The Detectorists also come to mind. So yeah, I quite liked Small Profits. I finally saw the film The Martian, which I'd stayed away from for so long thinking it would be boring, but I was bolt upright and awake for the whole thing. It's a really great film.
It really, really is.
Yeah, I loved it. And finally, Human Vapor is a Japanese series on Netflix, which starts off with this guy being interviewed on TV. And this mist creeps into the studio, and it creeps into his body and goes into his mouth and in his ears, I think, and it lifts him up in the air, and then he explodes all over the set, and everyone gets covered in blood. And they're all like, what the hell? And we go from there. Who is this guy, this human vapor who gets around and turns into mist and kills seemingly random people? Why is he doing that? It's great. It's extraordinary how Japanese TV makes stuff like this, which I think runs rings around a lot of Western TV show ideas. I really enjoyed that. Good stuff.
Nice. I did a bit of a rewatch of No Job for a Lady over the last month, a sitcom from the very early 90s. In fact, I was a little bit shocked to realise that season 1 happened when Mrs. Thatcher was still the Prime Minister, so we're going back quite a while. And indeed, the whole concept of this person is a brand new MP and they're a woman. How are we going to cope with that? What sort of what sort of issues are going to come up for her? And at a time when there were probably about 20 women in the House of Commons, so
right.
it does feel very, very sort of dated almost. But some of the issues were quite good. There were some good laughs. Now it does, of course, star Penelope Keith, who actually passed away when I was about 2/3 through that watch. And on the back of that. On the back of that, I did go and watch a few of my favourite episodes of To the Manor Born and Executive Stress. So that was a bit of a tribute to Penelope Keith, who did some really, really good shows. I want to go and find that one she did in the late 90s where she has to adopt her grandkids and hates it. I can't remember what it was called, but I will find it because that was apparently the favourite one that she did.
I'm trying to remember No Job for a Lady, and it's drawing a blank.
No, it was shown here. I do remember it.
Right.
But yeah, no, it's all up on YouTube now, so it's quite fun. And I have started the new Netflix Little House on the Prairie. Not quite sure what to expect, but it's actually a pretty cool adaptation. So I'm enjoying that, and we'll keep watching.
I saw that was out, and I thought, how do I feel about that? Because I remember the old show, and that was kind of a bit cheesy and such, and I was like, do I want to watch a remake of that? Maybe I do. I don't know. I'll have to try it.
Yeah, give it a shot. I think it's actually quite interesting, and it to me captures sort of that concept of just getting on a wagon out to the middle of just nowhere and putting a claim on a plot of land and just building a house and going, right, we're now part of this town, and just what that was like. Although it's obviously got a budget because the wolves were not convincing at all. I'll just say that.
Right. Very good. All right, Dave, leading into next time, tell us what we're going to do next.
So we are due to do a deep dive into an audio story next month, Rob, and we had a chat and decided we were quite curious to tackle The Paradise of Death, the John Pertwee audio adventure from 1993. So we'll be diving into that. Also coming up in the next few weeks, The Hand of Fear won the listener poll for which Hinchcliffe era story we would tackle on Gin and TARDIS next. So we hope to record that in a couple of weeks' time and have it out in August as well.
Lovely stuff. I'm excited about all of that, even the stuff I'm not on. Finally, before we go, could I ask any of you out there who use Apple Podcasts or similar to leave us a review on your app of choice if you've never done so? We've never asked for a cent from our audience in over a decade. We never will. But a review from some of you guys would be really, really great. It does really help the podcast, so thanks in advance for that.
Yes, absolutely. Please do.
But until then, I've been Rob.
You have. And I've been Dave.
You have indeed. This has been the Doctor Who Show. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
You've been listening to
The Doctor Who Show with Rob and Dave.
Find us online by searching for
The Doctor Who Show.
We also love it when you write in. Drop us a line anytime at hello@thedwshow.net.